What's going on, everyone? I wanted to quickly discuss a big headline lately this weekend is the NAR settlement. National Association of Realtors settled on a lawsuit that was placed on them by a bunch of big corporation lawyers, attorneys that decided to say that realtors are inflating the commission. So let's dive into this. One of the big problems we have in the real estate world right now is buyers cannot finance the commission for an agent. So in theory, they're supposed to pay out of pocket for a realtor. And yes, in most cases, I would say my services range from 2 to 3% on a commission, depending on the transaction, sometimes 4%. It really depends on the buyer's needs, how long we're going to be looking, how long it takes to find the home. But on average, we've set this standard between 2 to 3%. It is negotiable between the listing agent and the seller. I advise my sellers, what will it take to get a buyer agent and a buyer through the door? And I tell them the commissions, and it's very clear in the listing agreement what the commissions are, what I charge as a listing agent. Most of my transactions, I will say I charge between 5.5 to 6%. Honestly, in most cases, I could go to 7%. It depends on how much marketing is needed on the home. But a fair price, in many cases, it really factors in the area that you're buying in. For example, if you go to California, commissions are a lot less, maybe 4 to 5%, because the home prices are generally higher. San Antonio, average price point is about $350, $375. So you'll see between 2 to 3% for a buyer agent. Sometimes builders pay upwards of 4%, 5%. It all depends. A lot of factors go into this. But what people need to understand is buyers do not have a way to finance the commission for an agent. Now, the other question is buyers can just go and willy-nilly go buy a home without agent representation. And I'm going to tell you right now, if all realtors stopped working for a week, we would have next to zero transactions being done. That's because there's a mediation process involved in this transaction. It is a very complex transaction. There's a lot of things that can come up. There's a lot of title disclosures. There's a lot of seller disclosures. There's a lot of zoning, covenants, things that buyers need to be aware of before they jump into a contract. You don't want a buyer who's unrepresented, not qualified, jumping into a contract with a seller who has no idea what earnest money is, going and buying your property as a seller, come to find out 2 weeks later, they decide they don't want to buy that home anymore. That would happen significantly more without buyer representation. Buyers, as a buyer agent myself, I do 50% buyers and 50% sellers. When I consult with my buyers, we understand how the significance of earnest deposit, having a qualified lender who I know, like, and trust in this local area, who will vet my buyers, making sure that they are qualified for the loan and that they will not fall out of financing once they go under underwriting, which again is a common issue. People think that the consensus is what I'm reading online is that realtors start a transaction and like a month or two later we get paid. Very rarely does that happen. Most of the times I'm talking to sellers months before we list a home. Most of the time for buyers, I'm talking to them 3 to 4 months before I even look at buying. It's very rare that a buyer contacts me and says, hey, let's go look at this home tomorrow. I'm ready to buy. It doesn't happen that way. Sometimes these transactions take upwards of like 6 months before we even look at homes, upwards to a year. And that's not to mention the times when buyers will go out and decide, hey, halfway through 2 months in, I don't qualify for these homes. I'm just going to back out of the transaction altogether. They ultimately, as a realtor, you lose that sale. You don't get paid for all the work that you did up until that point. That is what commission's about. It is about providing a service of value to someone, to a client that is in need of educating and guidance. And whether that transaction falls through or not, the buyer can walk away scot-free and say, hey, this isn't my time. Sorry, Mr. Realtor. You took 3 months out of your life. You're never getting them. That happens. Unfortunately, we got to spread awareness, kind of what's going on in the real estate world. There is a lot of unknowns of what we do, and I'm going to do my due diligence to educate everyone on how we provide service and value. I'll start with my VA buyers. When we have out-of-state buyers, I'm not only showing them virtual homes, but I'm educating them on the homes, the neighborhoods, the cities, the crime rate, the school district, the appraisal, the appraised values of those homes, going into the valuation, how much a home's worth, how much you should pay, how much credits you get, how much you can negotiate the repairs. The list goes on. A lot of buyers, if you're not in this game daily, you're not going to understand where your negotiating point can start or how much leverage you have in the deal. Same goes for sellers. Sellers, having a realtor that can run comps, understanding the game, who is working with buyers on a daily basis, understanding what the buyers are looking for to help you stage your property correctly, and doing all the paperwork. We're not even going to mention the contract paperwork because we all know that there's contracts involved in this that get filled out. We're talking about 10 to 30 pages of forms that need to get filled out properly. But all this being said, the NAR lawsuit, the settlement that they agreed on is essentially not changing much, believe it or not. Buyers got paid $400+ million to disservice first-time home buyers, in my opinion, making it a lot more difficult for them to go out and buy a home, knowing they have no way of paying for a commission, let alone sometimes a down payment on a home. So unfortunately, first-time home buyers are a huge disservice for this because they're the ones who are going to suffer. However, the way around this, the NAR settlement says realtors, brokers cannot disclose commissions on the MLS website. Before, we would be able to go on and see which buyer or which sellers are offering commissions, which ones are not, and we'd be able to let the buyer know, hey, you know, this one's not offering commission, heads up, I'm not going to get paid. Most of the time, buyers understand, like, hey, that's not going to work for you. You do your due diligence. Now, we need a buyer representation agreement, which I have all my buyers fill out. It's going to have the commission amount that I charge my buyers to service your transaction from start to finish. Looking through all the homes, whatever it takes, start to finish. That means it could take upwards to a year, upwards of 6 months. It could take 3 months. It just depends on that. So the buyer representation is going to state out the commission agreement of what we decide on. However, the seller still can pay the commission. They just can't put on the MLS. So they can use a property website. They can use an app for a showing time app. They can put the commission there. They just can't put it on the MLS. So what does this change? Next to nothing as of right now. There's the next step down the road. Eventually, once HUD gets involved in this, they can finance the commission. That is more realistic. A buyer can finance their commission. They can go out and look for homes and have their representation locked to them. But until buyers can do that, they're up to the mercy of a seller helping them pay for the commission of the realtor. Let me just reiterate. If there was no realtors involved in a transaction, buyer and seller would chomp each other's heads off because there's a lot of emotions in this transaction. Those of you who bought a home with me understand it's a very, very emotional transaction. And having a realtor, two realtors mediating between the two, keeping emotions apart, keeping it professional, negotiating on your behalf is absolutely critical. I'll end that message with that. Let me know if you have any questions. What do you think about the lawsuit? Take care.